Welcome to Flesh and Pod, a flesh and blood podcast, breaking down weekly news and notes from the tournament scene, community drama, game strategy, and more. And now, here are your hosts, Darick and Logan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 134 of Flesh and Pod. My name is Logan. I'm your host. With me, as always, is better late than never, but also never, Darick Oswald. Darick, I missed you this weekend, buddy. What happened?
I put on my Flesh and Pod shirt, and it gave me all of the luck that our merch would normally give somebody.
Negative luck.
Yeah. Negative EV
all around.
I was supposed to come down to Origins. I ran into car trouble. It was just a really poor timed weekend because my wife had a friend's wedding and a family event pre-planned that required travel. Both of them were about an hour away from where we normally are, but also in different directions. And so she was in a spot where she could maybe bail me out. She did drive back Friday to try to help, but then was still not home most of the weekend. But also just my car was not cooperating. So it is being taken care of. It should hopefully be done tomorrow, available tomorrow, all things, if they work out properly. And then we'll be good, I guess, hopefully for the foreseeable future. But the good news, I guess it's good news. I don't know. The good news is the next couple of events I'm going to involve flights. So
much better. Less
likely to have car issues. The bad news, I guess, is if there is a mechanical failure, it's a bit more dire consequences. But you know.
don't get Boeinged either way. You can get Boeinged.
Yeah, well, I've already dodged that once in my life, so.
Which
you're giving me that
though?
The plane crash thing. We've had this conversation. I know we have.
Right. Okay. Yep. The plane crash thing.
Yeah, I was supposed to be on the plane going to Lagos because I was supposed to go to Nigeria for work, and then the plane I was going to be on crashed, and everyone on board died.
Yeah, I didn't know if Boeing had set a hitman after you. I wasn't sure.
Not yet.
Well, again, the life is young. I got that's much as true. I did read a little bit about your exploits on the weekend on Twitter.
So that family event thing that I was talking about, right? My wife's brother is dating somebody, and her son had a birthday party. It's a child from before they started dating. Very eclectic group all the way around. This is my first time interacting with anybody outside of her and her son from her family. The entire thing was this weird, bizarre experience because first of all, when my wife said okay, we're going to this birthday party, and she said it's right next to my brother Scott's house, not Tyler, the one that's dating her, but her other brother, who lives normally an hour away from us, right? And I was like, oh, okay, well, and she was like, we'll probably just park there and walk over. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, well, because he lives in a small town. If you're from Michigan, or, if your name is Greg, Ovid is the place I'm talking about. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, well, we just park there and we walk a block or whatever because it's a small town. So when she says that, no, it was literally right next door. Somehow one of her brothers started dating the next door neighbor of her other brother, right? So that was already throwing me. And then we walk in, and I'm not even making this up. It's it's not it's a small house, but it's a small house for the number of people that were in there. And so there were several kids, full on WWE wrestling, whatever. I was that age. I did that stuff too. I'm not surprised that it was happening. I'm surprised that it was happening directly in front of all of the parents and nobody was saying a word. And when I say full WWE, I'm not they're grappling or whatever. I saw a kid stand up and smack a kid across the mouth, loud noise, and nobody said a word. And then I look over at Monroe, who's sitting in a chair in the corner, and he's just his eyes are huge. And then I look over at Stark, and even Stark's not doing something. And so, like, if you know my kids, they're normally pretty hyper.
Right,
so
yeah.
the fact that they were shocked,
I'm out. Fuck this.
They were shell shocked says a lot about the space. And then so I'm like, all right, well, like, why is this the case? Like, so I'm looking around the room, and there's somebody, and I was like, oh, maybe it's one of my like bleeding heart lefty communist friends, because that's what I am, right? Because I see somebody wearing a shirt with Trump's mugshot, and I'm like, haha, maybe they are mocking him. And instead it said wanted, and then it had Trump's mugshot picture, and it said for president 2024, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And then every interaction I had with people, it just continued to
spiral.
Confirm. Yeah, it was just I mean, whatever I did to deserve this weekend, I hope I've atoned.
I think you're paid in full. Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, I don't know. It was an expensive weekend. It was not an enjoyable weekend. It was somehow simultaneously way too short and far too long. And I just I think I'm traumatized. I don't know. We'll see.
You think you're traumatized?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, to be honest, because there's a lot
all
of things
the stacked up trauma. Is that why?
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things where it's like I feel like it's more like I feel like I should be traumatized. I'm still kind of numb to it all, but that's that's kind of my MO, right? Is just I use ignoring and avoidance as coping mechanisms, according to therapist number 3.
How's that matchup going? Do you think you can win this one?
Well, he's requested to see me less, so it's off to
okay. We're
making progress.
Off to a good start. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Therapy is not a competition, right?
Yeah, well, it's like neither is the GPS, but that doesn't mean that when I put the thing on, I'm not like saying, if it says, it's an hour drive, I'm like, bet.
Yeah, call. Like, let's fucking go. Yeah, and I did, speaking of trauma, I did make sure to send a video to Elaine of the falling dice at the casino so that she would remember when they were going to hurt all of those people, because... Oh,
right. Elaine, if you're listening, you need to let us know what the next event you're going to be at. And when I say us, I mean me and Sophie, because we found the goldfish pickle
spicy
thing, the spicy dill pickle that she was looking for.
I think it would be the Jersey event.
And it's so funny. I ended up scrolling up and I realized she had posted an Instagram thing and said, I will be hunting these down. I didn't even know that. We were literally at the store trying to get stuff for that whatever family event thing, right? Because it's a family thing, so like you have to bring a present and like food and whatever, and anyway, and when we were there, she pointed and she went, you should take a picture of that and send it to Elaine. And so I didn't even realize that those were the ones she was trying to hunt down. And then she was like find out if she needs us to get them for her. So she was legit. Elaine, if you're listening, we will get you the spicy dill
pickle goldfish. Okay, fine. I didn't do much of anything in Flesh and Blood this weekend. I was busy casting the Clash Ground tournament, which was won by former Flesh and Blood world champion Michael Hamilton, though. So
turns out card gamers can card game.
Gamers gonna game, and this is not an Alpha Clash podcast. However, it's also not a Star Wars podcast. It's also not a family trauma podcast. It's also not therapy. Well, it is kind of a therapy podcast.
But also, we're talking about a former Flesh and Blood world champion, so like this is still relevant.
It fits in, and there's all Matt Coles competed, Ian Schaefer. Like, it's not a non.
Roger showed up too, right?
Roger Bodie did really well with a bad deck, per his own admission, and so yeah, it was a great event. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time casting. We had to replace Darick in the booth with Dagan, and Dagan did an insanely good job for never, ever having touched this before.
You say replace instead of upgrade.
Yeah. It's the way that it felt was not an upgrade. It was a dynamic change, but I thought that the dynamic change, because of how unfamiliar you and I can be sometimes about stuff, it had its benefits. It also had its drawbacks, but honestly, that would be like a perfect Alpha Clash 3-man rotation. Would be like the three of us would be a very nice fresh breath of fresh air. I by the way, I drove back from Columbus today. I am not a well man. Well, I never am. The fuck am I talking about? But had a great time casting the event. It's up there. It's on YouTube. I know a lot of the fappers were listening or watching or whatever. The chat was very lively, which was awesome. It was funny because all of chat thought that Dagan hated me, which is so phenomenal.
Correct.
Because they just had it right. Like they figured it out. They saw the Matrix, and no, it was more of they didn't understand like the dynamic. And
that's
so
fair.
I mean, anybody that meets Dagan automatically thinks that he hates him anyway. So it's not until later that you find out, oh no, he doesn't. That's just Dagan. But he was very good in the analyst role. He even did one of the interviews, which was great, with Ridge. All in all, for a smaller event, it was. I mean, Ethan did a great job in the production side of it. It looked great. We tried.
I was really sad I missed Ethan too. I haven't seen him in forever.
I hadn't either. We tried out a few new things for his production work, and it looked really good. I think that it worked pretty well. So all in all, like really good weekend for that. The Alpha Clash booth was busy, which is fantastic. I did get to meet some new people that I'd never met before. I mean, and I'm the type of person that enjoys that type of thing. And I mean, I had a blast. I did also get to, in the most like me way possible, two of the Alpha Clash players like, well, we've tried Flesh and Blood before, but I don't think we played it right. And so Keith did a quick like, okay, here's an Oldham deck, here Oldham precon, here's the Lexi precon, go over things quickly. And so he gives them the quick rundown. I just sit down, I start watching, and I'm like, oh, you sweet summer children. And watching, I'm like, okay, so do you want to like a little bit of just how things happen and how deep this game is? And they're like, yeah, kind of. I'm like, all right. And so I was teaching the Lexi player honing hood tricks and frazzle and Mark of Lightning bullshit. And he's like, oh Jesus, this game is fucking deep. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Now let me tell you about pitch stacking.
Didn't even get that far.
Right.
And then and then they're like, yeah, we've always thought about like starting a podcast. I'm like, okay, I can help with this. I've got some advice. Step 1, don't. Just that's my first piece of advice is don't. This is 134 fucking weeks in a row of which I do all the, we don't even have 500 YouTube subscribers. Like,
I can't wait for when our number of episodes eclipse our
the subscriber
subscribers.
It's a ways away, but it's always funny to me because it's like I look at an episode.
You say that, but all it takes is some people to hit unsubscribe.
That's true. Don't encourage them, Jesus Christ. But like, I looked at our views, and our views on like the most recent video were like 400, and I'm like, but we have 355 subscribers.
Yeah.
What the fuck? I'm like, all right, I guess I never started caring about that, so it's impossible for me to stop caring about something I didn't give a shit about to begin with. And I just laughed. I just thought it was funny. But so I kind of just went through that, and I'm like, okay, so first one is don't. And second, as somebody who has now done, at the time, it's like, who is somebody who has done 133 weeks in a row of a podcast, don't do that. They're like, oh, so don't take breaks. And I'm like, no, that is not what I said. No, take breaks. Don't do the stupid fucking streak thing. It's awful. Because all you'll do is like crush yourself to make sure that the streak stays alive. You'll do shit you shouldn't do to make sure the streak stays alive. Your mental health will be in the shitter half the time because you'll just be rushing around and being like, okay, I need to make sure I cut off whatever I'm doing because I got to make sure I record, or I got to record from parts unknown in a murder house in Mansfield, Ohio. That also did happen. And where the basement was really eerie, and the blood stain on the hardwood. But you do this kind of shit. And the one time that you're like, maybe this is a reprieve. Maybe I found a window where I can just kind of say, you know what? There's not a lot on this week. Maybe this is the week we just break the streak. We give ourselves a little bit of freedom, and you bring it up to your co-host. And they said, yeah, but what if we just record an episode instead?
Yeah. What if we just do this thing?
And then we just did the thing anyway. And here we are. That was like 40 or like 30 weeks ago, legit 30 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And Jesus, fuck. Okay. But yeah. So I was trying to give them advice on that. And I'm like, beyond those pieces, if you have any other questions, if you decide to go down this hellspawn route of being a content creator, I'm happy to answer anything you need help with. But I wouldn't saying, I mean, I love it because I, one, love talking to a microphone, and two, I'm just a masochist. Probably. Hard to say.
Probably.
Okay, fine. Well, you know, all right. Beat me, I guess. That's fine. Which is why I think I'd be into fab boxing. That came up recently again. And people are up there like on Twitter just about one. Nathan Crawford was fucking winning Twitter today. Hitting up Majin and Peter pretty hard. Two, I'm all about the fab boxing. Like, put me in, coach. I can finally do a thing. And then I can actually play Guardian because I just need to last the 5 minutes of fab to get 3 minutes in the ring. That sounds way more fun. But, you know, I also have to make sure that the game lasts 5 minutes. So I need ham sandwiches and lots of tank time, things like that. But to anybody that did come up and talk to us during Origins, thank you. I appreciate it. And appreciate the kind words, appreciate the support on both ends, on the Alpha Clash end and on the Flesh and Blood end. I even played a game of Star Wars against Jordan. I even got a game of Star Wars in.
Wow.
He was like, hey, you want to play a game of Star Wars? I'm like, I didn't bring my decks are back at the hotel because I actually did bring them with me. He's like, oh, that's okay. David, do you have a deck? He's like, yeah, here you go. And I'm like, what is this? He's like, Han Solo. I'm like, I have never played this fucking hero in my life. Sounds great.
Was it the Casino Han?
What does that even mean?
Like Ewing reinforcement.
Oh yeah, it was that.
Yeah, okay, that's fun.
And
I love that deck.
He presented Vader Blue, and I'm like, okay, I don't even know how this matchup plays out. That's fine. And then proceeded to just beat the ever-loving shit out of him. And I was like, okay, so it's just a normal card game.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jordan was slightly tilted. To the craps table was also a good time because, again, when you teach a new player craps, we taught 2 new players craps, karma repays you and you get to print money for a little bit. And then also we discovered that if you bet the horn, which is betting kind of pseudo shitty outcomes, you're actually giving blood to the blood god, and then the blood god smiles upon you. So when we were in our most dire, Jordan and I went ahead and praised the blood god, and then both wound up after being money on table, you know, dicks in hand in bad shape. So that was nice. That was a good time. Had a lot of fun with that. That was my week. That was my weekend. It was a great time. I can't wait to run back, you know, a little bit of this at Gen Con because I won't be doing the booth work or the casting work or anything like that. But I will get to see a lot of the same people that I work with Alpha Clash. And then also a lot of the Fab family. Darick will be there as long as this car starts. And like we get Elaine, we get Mobo, we get Summer, we get Chris Brummett will be there. I found out. I talked to Chris on the weekend too. So a lot of the familiar faces and friends, and then obviously Jordan and Abby, you'll be there with your hellspawn. I can't think of Stark any other way anymore. Maybe he'll grow out of it.
No.
No. Okay. Well, just I guess I'll fuck me. I guess.
It gets worse by the day, man. I'm just setting proper expectations. It gets worse by the day.
I really do appreciate that. But yeah, so same rules, really. I mean, if you're at Gen Con, send me a message on in Discord and say, hey, I'm at Gen Con and can we find a time? Yeah, I'll find a time. Come say hi, hang out, talk, whatever. I'm totally down. That'd be a lot of fun. We do have news and notes, but we can also just skip it all and go to listener questions. I'm okay either way.
Let's do the news and notes because I feel like it will be relatively quick. I mean, on the one hand, we get to talk about national stuff, but on the other hand, I think the story is pretty straightforward, so we can bang through this.
So Battle Hardened CTAC happened, so that's Seattle Tacoma for those that don't know, and it was won by Ethnic Smoke.
Yeah.
So Caster doing things. It was funny. He from the stories that I was picking up, he went 2-2 at Armory on Friday, then turns around and wins a Battle Hardened the next day on New, and then turns around and gets the finals of New with New versus Zen, and then they prize rearrange so that the gold foil goes to second, and then he gets second. So that's a double gold foil weekend. So casters can play. Turns out, who knew? We at least know they can play in 1 day events.
Yeah, 1 day events.
1 day events.
Yeah,
and
now that he's been on the desk, that counts for Dagan too.
Oh God, day one Dagan can come back because he's a caster now.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. But is this much to do about nothing, or is this just New being so good into the best deck in the format that it's just collecting some percentage and just effectively turning a corner?
I stand by my initial assessment, which is that she is, as much as I love her, she is good, not great. She is good into what many are saying is the best deck in the format right now in Zen. Clearly the most consistent deck in the format. And I'm not saying it's not the best deck. I'm just saying that I think that some of the same things that I'm about to say about New also favor Zen, which is it might not feel like it, but we're still actually pretty new into the Mistveil meta.
For fuck's sake, why did we have to do that? We're talking about New, and we're so new into the...
Yeah. I don't understand what the problem is. Anyway, we are very new into the Mistveil meta, and there are just certain card game truths that exist, right? Consistent decks and or aggressive decks traditionally do well early on in metas because they will punish people for misplays and bad draws.
Yep.
And Zen is a great deck, and I am not taking anything away from Zen players. It's a very difficult, aggressive deck to play. There's a lot of lines. But if you are somebody who had played Ninja before, you probably were pretty familiar with a lot of the lines. So it wasn't I think as much of a jump to slide into playing Zen well, whereas Enigma, while it is very clear she is an illusionist, the reality is she's a guardian. So if you're an illusionist diehard, it might be a little bit different for you. I think some of the guardian players are actually doing really well on her. And then New is interesting because yes, she's an assassin and you can see the cornerstones of the class there, but she doesn't play like the other two, or at least if you play her properly, I don't think she plays like the other two. But what's happening is, or at least this is what I believe is happening, and I'm happy to be proved wrong over time, but I think that these early events are going the way they are because Zen is a very good deck, but it's also very consistent and aggressive, and so it can punish decks that are unrefined. It can punish people for bad draws and misplays, right? That's the nature of that deck. So it's going to do very well. I would expect it to do well. New, I think, is doing well-ish. Now, I also want to point out that, while she's getting some events, she's not doing so at a much greater rate than, say, a KO. It's just that KO is also considered a good deck, right? Yeah. But she's not, the clear number two. She's just also getting some wins, but I think that that's a byproduct of two things. One, as you said, very good into Zen, and I expect Zen to have a decent market share of the meta for a bit. So that helps. She's just bad into some other decks that I think are really good right now. But the other thing is that I firmly believe, the more that I play her anyway, that there's just a lot of people who don't know how to play against her. And part of it is that's by design. The whole point is that you're not supposed to know what's coming next, but also there's not a refined new list. There's a lot of people who don't agree on how to build her. Mine was certainly different that I took to the calling. I've seen a lot of other different builds, and part of that is also what makes her cool, but it also makes it difficult to play against her because when you're going to an event, you think you know what you're up against in terms of lines, but you might not, right? Like they might be running more attack reactions than you thought. They might be running more defense reactions than you thought. They might be running weird tech cards like I was. Or if you're just not familiar with some of the stuff in general, again, like you would be surprised how many people just miss that Fang Strike and Slither can target non-assassin and non-mystic stuff, right? We know that Hiss and, Venomous Bite have to target mystic and or assassin stuff, and so a lot of people think that the cards they create fall under that same category, but they don't. And so sometimes you throw a Command and Conquer and they block with 6 and you're like, okay, well I hit it with the strike because and you knew I had it, but they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. Or even if it's not that, like, you knew I had it, if you're running a Arousing Wave, right, it's an easy pop, that sort of thing, right? And then again, depending on the build, like I said, because there's a lot of ways to do it, it's not just Command and Conquer, right? Weakest Link is really good right now in a lot of matchups, and so that's a good one to go over the top, even though it's generic. I've been messing around lately, just trying to really stick it to the Zens as they gain market share with Amnesia, because that's another really good card into them. Just because at a minimum, it like forces cards out of their hand one way or the other. So I do think that a lot of it, this is my long-winded way to say, a lot of it is good into Zen, but I also think a lot of it is people are just still learning how to navigate against her. And once people have more reps and they settle down and they stop getting so flustered about like, oh, that thing came out of nowhere, because nothing's like more demoralizing than like thinking you have something covered and then somebody is like doubled just a nick onto their bonds or whatever, and now you're taking 14 and losing a card and blah blah blah. So
and then all the other triggers on the card.
Yeah, right. Like, so like I get it, and so like that can fluster you, and then you're like, well, I don't even know what to do in this matchup, but it's like that was just like one bad play and whatever. So I just think that over time we are going to see some things level out. I still think KO is a pretty good deck, and the deck that I think is probably, and this is going to maybe kind of sound as a shot because it's not like it's doing poorly, but the deck that I think might be underperforming right now is Azalea, because I still think Azalea is in a really good spot. But yeah, I'm very happy with where this meta is, even if there are certain decks I still hate running into, because it's, again, just feels like for the last year and a half we've been saying it, but it's just very wide open, and it feels like you have a chance and that you can capitalize on things, if you're a decent player. So if I ever become a decent player,
you should really look into doing that.
Yeah, I should.
I mean, have you considered just trying to becoming an expert on whichever hero wins Iceland's nationals? Like, just do something random like that.
I mean, I've considered moving to Iceland and then just winning their nationals over and over.
But until you do that.
Right. Until I do.
So we are in the midst of national season right now.
Yes.
I mean, U.S. nationals being last weekend. The weekend prior. Yeah, whatever. You know what the fuck I mean. And the absolute legend, Barrett Goss, a.k.a. Vishra, puts together a nationals breakdown Google Doc list, and it is phenomenal. It gives all the data points you'd ever want. So we're able to see exactly where the finishes were in what countries and who has obtained Living Legend points. We're also, since we're recording on a Monday, the Living Legend board on the mothership has been updated, so we have a good idea what's going on here. So we did have Zen leading the way, is leading the way with 190 points during the Mistveil season, which that's a lot. Already at 190 on the Living Legend board, has more Living Legend points than Levia. Has not been around near as long. Dash is currently still leader in the clubhouse with 835, so getting closer and closer and closer. Fi, Bravo, and Katsu are the next ones, but they're not even on the board for this season yet. Azalea has 100 points on the board for the MST season. KO has 75. Kano has 75. But Zen definitely is the one picking up the most market share here. The 100 out of Azalea, with that, a big portion of that came from calling Minneapolis. Because that was 50. Right. So that's half of it. So there's a big thing there. We're seeing a lot of movement right now with the living legend points and what's good and what's not. I gotta know. Like, we're seeing, and I hate to tap the sign. We tap the sign a lot, but I hate to tap the sign. But we're seeing a lot of talk already about Zen too good need ban. Do you think that's the case?
My knee-jerk reaction is to say no, because it's certainly a deck that you can beat. There are some decks that are better at it than others. There's also, I think that if anything, the biggest problem with Zen right now is just that the decks that are really good into it get beat by some other ones in a very polarized way. So, for example, and we were talking about this before we started recording, right? I feel like both Bravo and Victor could be positioned in a way where they would just beat up on Zen really, really hard. Just full stop. I've never been scared of a ninja when I was on Bravo, when you build them the anti-ninja way. And you can do so in a way where you don't lose too much to your other matchups, but your bad matchups are always going to be bad. And so you're still going to be bad into a Prism, and they're still floating around. You're going to probably be bad into the new Enigma, because they're also a Guardian who's just going to go deeper. And the biggest problem with them is, like, if you're on Bravo, but you're playing against an Enigma, the same things that they hit you with also defend themselves, and that is not the case for you. And so if you're wondering, like, why that's a bad matchup, it's not that you can't, like, get your damage through. It's just that they, believe it or not, they're better at fatiguing than you are, because they place a threat, and then that also soaks damage for them, and they place a threat, and that also soaks damage. And Uranothos can only do so much to make up that ground, right? So, like, that's a bad matchup. And then the big elephant in the room, for both Victor and Bravo, is very obviously New, right? So New, I think, is good into Zen. I think she struggles very much into Enigma. I think she struggles into KO. I'm getting better at my Kano matchup, but I still think that's probably overall unfavored. But I'm closing the gap on that one with some of the changes I've made post-calling. But, like, so New has some bad matchups, and so some of those can feel polarized. And then if you hop on, like, one of the Guardians saying, okay, I really want to target Zen and a couple of these other decks, you can do that, but then you'll also have polarized matchups, right? Like, pretty polarized. New just, like, you know, I told that story of my match at the Calling, where I was down by like 20 some odd health by like round or turn 3 or whatever, and then I turned the corner and promptly dissected them, because, like, it's just so unfavored for the Guardians. So you could have them. You still have New that's pretty decent into Zen. I think Azalea, as long as you don't have a hard time finding your red in the ledgers and they don't find their combo really fast, I think that you're fine. I will say this, though. That I think that's the biggest reason that people are frustrated with Zen, and why they might be calling for it, is because even if you play a deck that is, you know, quote unquote good into Zen, you do run the risk of, like, turn 2 them presenting 30, right?
Right. Yes.
Which is, again, why to me, it's like, it's physical Kano, because, like, sometimes their turns are literally nothing, and then other times it's all of the things. And there's a lot of play patterns and lines and things that you can do. So I can understand that frustration, but I do think that the deck is beatable in the current state. I think there's a lot of decks that can prey on it. It's just whether or not people want to take that risk. And so, again, long-winded, and I apologize, but I like having the background for what I'm about to say. I don't think that there needs to be a ban, but I would not be shocked if they do something to target Zen's consistency with the big combo turns, so that Zen can still do the things it's designed to do, but makes its what's supposed to be bad matchups worse, if that makes sense. I could see them doing something. I don't know what that is. I would have to put on my design hat, slap some things around or whatever, but I trust Brian and the team. And if they said like, hey, this is what we want to do, I could see them doing something like that. And if anything, it would remind me of like the bullseye bracers thing, right? Seemed like a small thing, but it was like just enough to kind of get down some of the consistency. I could see them doing something targeted like that for Zen.
Yeah, I think it's closer to the belittle ban in Fi, where it was, okay, Fi being able to go dig up the blue that it needs to just extend its turn for free on something that's going to deal damage is just too much. And so the belittle ban, that's what's similar to me. Is that like...
Could you like even imagine?
Nope, I don't want to even fucking think about it. It is so goddamn terrifying. Like, yeah. No.
And especially not just because of all of the consistency stuff, but also because of all those extra shuffles you get for your chi to get them back around. Like, that would be
that would be like, you might not even play the Crouching Tiger lines at that point in time. It's probably just, here are all the best combo lines for Ninja. Fucking die.
The Crouching Tiger stuff is simply for your like setting up your weird combos for the bond stuff, and that's about it. But
right. And
no, I could see it being closer to that as well. But like overall, I just think that if they do anything, and I'm not saying that they will, but if they do, I would expect it to be in line with that, where they're just trying to target some of the overall consistency. So like, I don't think it will, for example, be like Traverse, because as good as that card is, and I think it's phenomenal, it's also like, that's just taking a whack at all three of the new heroes at that point. Like, you don't have a brand new set and then neuter one of the coolest things that all three of them can do.
But Strides of Reprisal, which gives you the free card.
I could see the boots. I was just about to say that. There are already several other boot options that you could put in, right? There was the other non-mystic boots where it's Banish Zone, I believe, instead.
Yep.
But it's not in hand, so that could be relevant. Or maybe they want you to go back to like a Tide Flippers or even a Snaps or whatever, right? But like, I could legitimately see the boots, because there is something to be said about Traverse, but doing like when you know you're about to do the go off and you block, like if you've got the 4-card hand in the arsenal and then you block with Traverse and you get the Crouching Tiger from the boots as well. Holy cow, right?
And you almost always save that for your Art of War turn, so you can banish the tiger. Yep. That doesn't fucking matter. Like, you don't care about this tiger at all. You banish it.
You're just like, I pitch my blue to go up 2 resources and 2 cards and
yes. My starting turn is now 6 cards plus arsenal and 2 floating.
Yep.
What? Like, that's a ninja gets 7-card hands with floating resources. Awkward. So yeah, that's the one that I see people talking about as Strides getting hit. I think it's early, and we haven't had enough solve for X quite yet. And we had this discussion early with Fi, and they eventually did do something by banning Belittle, which, again, I understand you wanted to just hit the consistency a little bit, because Fi was ultra consistent. Like, Fi without Belittle is still ultra consistent. Fi with Belittle was like pod racing shit, because you were just always getting like, you pitch something, you play Belittle, you get a blue, now you can swing your Searing Blade with the resource you need for the next thing. It was always like a chain of events, or like it's an Art of War, with your free resource, whatever. It was a well-oiled machine with Belittle. And so they got rid of that to try to reduce the consistency. That's kind of what I can see happening here, is trying to reduce some of the consistency. Even if it's on the pop-off turn, because like you said, it's physical Kano. If you can limit the pop-off turn, it's not as good. It's still really good, though. So I don't think that eliminates the deck by any stretch of the imagination, but it does make it less consistent. I would say, if you're asking me what I want to see, I would say no bans. I don't want to see anything changed. I just want it to be, let it happen. And if you think that, I guess this is the hard part. If you think that it's too much going into Pro Tour Amsterdam and that you're going to lack for diversity because of that, I understand. That might tilt it in the favor of taking action. But ultimately, no. Like, I don't think that that's the case. I think you gotta give these teams and these people time to figure it out. There are still 750 points remaining in the season. Zen is obviously leading in top 8s and wins. Had 5 wins, has fucking like 26 top 8s. KO, Enigma, and Dash.io each have 2 wins on the season for Nats. So doing pretty okay. Anything else you have to say about Nationals at the moment? Like, this will keep a running update throughout the season. Are you good?
I guess.
Okay.
I'm just looking at these and I'm realizing that like Prism isn't going up fast enough.
No, Prism's getting nothing. Like Prism,
people need to start winning more with her. Go play Prism.
Go play Prism. That's our message. Go be a cop.
Listen, it's come to the point where I'm going to have to start playing Illusionists just to get rid of them.
That isn't how that works. You have to win events.
Yeah,
in order to get living legend points.
Maybe
on
that's my heel turn. Maybe that's when I start doing well in events.
Okay. Fair enough. We did get some more information for Flesh and Blood at Gen Con, which was exciting. We are going to have the First Strike decks. We kind of found out a little bit about those. So the first Strike deck is going to be Aurora, which is the Lightning Ranger from Rosetta. And then the second one is Terra, who is an Earth Guardian. So not in Rosetta. Terra is, as of right now, this First Strike deck only. Doesn't mean that later on it couldn't be something else. Right. But Terra is, again, Earth Guardian or Elemental Guardian Hero, Essence of Earth, 420. Just pretty normal there. At the beginning of each phase, if there is an Earth card in your pitch zone, you may pay a resource. If you do, create a might token. So pretty what's this? Like bland, I guess. Pretty basic as far as that goes.
It seems pretty sweet.
It's also sweet.
Just saying.
Yeah, so because at the end of your turn, you just make a might token. If you've got a resource floating, you have an Earth card.
As somebody who tried very hard when Tails first came out to play Pump and Thump, I look at Terra and I get so excited.
There's no such thing as a bad Pump and Thump. Or what's the other one? What's the one from Heavy Hitters? Tromp, is that it? What's the one that is effectively Thump at home?
I'd have to pull up my Bravo list.
Because of course it's in there. But these are going to be pre-comp blitz decks. So they're kind of basic. You're going to be, I think their MSRP is $12. So they're fairly cheap. They come out officially on August 23rd, but you can get them 3 weeks early if you're at Gen Con. They'll have them available there for purchase. So again, a nice little intro product. I kind of like that. Personally, especially at something like Gen Con where you're going to be running like learn to plays, this is perfect. Like this is great marketing, great product, good idea. Right?
Yeah.
And
it's working because Stark already said to me, he was like, hey, can we get one of each? Because we've been playing Blitz a ton here at home just to teach him the game, and he was really excited.
Does he already want to play Guardian?
No, he's excited about Aurora.
Okay.
He tried Oldhim for a little bit, but it wasn't his speed. He really likes the things that attack. So like his favorite of the ones that we have at home so far is Zen. Zen is the first one that he has like started adding his own cards to make changes. But
gotcha. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. We do also
just real quick, I wanted to say, I think that this is probably why the Marvel doesn't match for Aurora.
It is why. Yep.
Because when we were talking about that, and I was like, that Marvel is different art, but now it makes sense. I think that this one, the First Strike deck, will be the one that's actually been revealed so far, and then the Marvel version will be the one for the actual set.
We also know what the next Armory deck will be after Bolton, which comes out in July. And this one will be Azalea! The Cult of Azalea Rejoices. So in this case, you're getting a headpiece called Target Totalizer, which is, I think, bad, but I don't know because I'm not a Ranger player. It is no block. Ranger head is majestic. It doesn't actually matter. But it's destroy this whenever an arrow with an aim counter hits this turn, draw a card, go again.
So first of all, it does matter because Commoner is a format, sir.
Oh, right. Yeah. I forget people play that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if I remember right, rare equipment's also allowed in Commoner. Isn't that like the one weird? It's Commoner except for the
thing.
Yeah. So it being majestic really just
that
matters.
Does make sense. Okay. And it's obviously not a good replacement for something that blocks or New Horizons shenanigans or Skullbone shenanigans with Azalea, but it's a card that exists. The one that is. Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, I'm actually kind of excited for either like future Rangers or whatever that care a bit more about aim counters. Obviously, that's a thing that they've slowly been pushing out over time, but I really do think that we're going to get like for lack of a better term, a sniper Ranger at some point in the future that'll really amp up the caring about aim counters. And this could be one of those things where like it comes out and it's like okay or whatever now, but in the future could end up being really, really good for certain characters.
Agreed. And we had I saw some of that going around Twitter because you also have the card Line It Up. This card reads awesome to me. It's yellow, which we usually don't say that about yellows, but it's a 1-cost block 3 Ranger action. Your next arrow attack this turn gets +3, so kind of boilerplate Ranger templating there. You may turn a face down arrow in your arsenal face up if you do put an aim counter on it. So you get to really take advantage of the aim counter things that do exist already, and it also expands that for the future. I think that's really cool. I think that's good design. And again, the art doesn't miss. So I really think that this card will see play. That's my take on it. Maybe it's more of a Riptide card than a Azalea card, but either way. Also, with a new Ranger coming to play, like if there are aim counters matter, things in Rosetta with Aurora, that also could be a thing, right? Aurora's a Rune Blade. Never mind. Yeah, I'm dumb.
I've made that same thing.
Why do I think she's a Ranger?
Because she kind of reminds me of Lexi. Like her appearance and like demeanor kind of reminds me of Lexi.
She looks like Lexi.
I have done that same thing where I've been like, oh yeah, oh wait, no, there's no Ranger. It's just Rune Blades and Wizards.
Yeah. Arcane damage. Right. Yeah. So not in her, but we could see an aim counter Ranger coming soon. That wouldn't surprise me. Like more of an aim counter Ranger, I should say. Or
just like aim counter characters in general. Like when we get Rangers and Pirates in that set that you and me and Armado,
Steven, that we designed.
Yeah. Because you gotta aim the blunderbuss. You know what I mean?
You do, and you aim the blunderbuss because we got to make sure that we hit that we hit all the notes that Flesh and Blood typically does. You have to aim the blunderbuss to get that booty. Yeah. So those are the types of things we have to make sure we're doing. Any more on the Gen Con stuff? I that's all I had.
I'm just excited.
Yeah.
Like I said, Stark is already, talking about the things that he wants to do with Flesh and Blood and Star Wars at Gen Con. Those are his two big things that he's like focused on. Obviously, I said after Gen Con last year, man, I really wish that they would appear there, and now they did. So very clearly, I want to show my support, and I'll swing by the booth and all that jazz, do some events. Yep. So I'm just excited. Like
I will definitely swing by the booth, because I would love to just take some time and talk to the convention team, honestly. Tell them I appreciate them. If nothing else, they won't know who we are, and that's fine. No one ever does, outside of Josh and Alex. No one at LSS knows who we are. But Trevor kinda.
Yeah, Trevor knows who I am.
You are, not we are.
Yeah.
Two different things.
How's that Matt treating you?
I don't know. It's somewhere around here.
I have a cool hat. I should be wearing my hat.
You should be wearing your hat. You do have a cool hat. I don't have a hat. You see, you're more important than me. I do have a cold foil time snap potion, though. So do you.
Was there a time snap in there?
Sure was. And a flick flack.
I haven't even looked yet.
Yeah, and a flick flack.
That's actually really cool because I missed because time snap was LA, right?
No, that's energy potion. Time snap.
Oh, energy.
Time snap was nationals.
Time snap was nationals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which I didn't qualify, but I got the promo. It's great. Realm time. We're getting close. So we're less than a month out now from Realm Fest in Princeton, New Jersey. It's a festival now. You'll have the Flesh and Blood 5K Brawl in Princeton, New Jersey, that will qualify for the 50K Rumble at the end of the year. $70 to enter. Classic Constructed, that is going to be on Saturday, July 20th at Realm Fest in Princeton, New Jersey. If you don't have tickets, get your tickets now. Darick will be casting. I believe I know who the other casters are, but I don't know if that's been announced, so I'm not going to. So yeah, please make sure that you're getting signed up for that. If playing in Flesh and Blood isn't your cup of tea, which why are you listening to this show? Or if you want other options as well, just in case the brawl doesn't go great, there will also be Pokemon and Star Wars events there. I believe Lorcana as well. I guess I'm not sure on the Pokemon. But so yes, there will be other things to do as well. Like I said, top 8 of the brawl does get a spot in the 50K Flesh and Blood Realm Rumble Invitational at the end of the year. That will be in December at some point in time. That date hasn't been announced yet. So yes, if you're interested in that and also interested in getting some reps in ahead of Amsterdam, great option. Go there, get some reps in, finalize some tweaks to your deck and maybe win some cash in the process. That seems like pretty good EV, not going to lie. You ready for listener questions? We've got a pretty good handful here.
Yes, I'm very ready.
We got some really good ones, I think, personally.
I think so.
Johnny Pastrami, how's it going, Johnny? He asks, what's the grossest or weirdest thing you've seen occur at a store, big box or grocery? I don't know about grossest, but the weirdest thing that happened once is I helped break up a fight between a customer. I mean, I assume they were a customer. Maybe they never bought anything, and a cashier because they were harassing this poor woman who was working. And so like I stepped in and separated the two. And then when the store manager showed up, I was trying to like be very clear that because I didn't want the employee to get in trouble. I felt so bad. She tried working through it. She tried calling security. Then the person attacked her. Right. And so when the manager came up, right. So I'm like, I just wanted them to know like, hey, this person did everything they could. They weren't at fault, yada, yada. And so the manager turned to me and then he goes, so, are you with loss prevention? And I was like, no, I'm just a customer. We were in line behind. Just a dude, man.
Just a dude. And he was like, oh, why? Like he was just so stunned like that somebody would help. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like it just, seemed like the right thing to do. So
Yeah, mine was, I was working as a man. So I worked as a retail manager for a very long time. Before my my career in corporate America. And it was Black Friday, or like in that general area. I believe it was Black Friday or that weekend. And I was working at a hardware store. Not the nicest hardware store by any stretch of the imagination. And I get over the walkie, I hear, hey, I don't know how to say this, but there's just shit all over the floor. And I'm like, it's a one way to say it at least. So I come out, and sure enough, there's just a trail of streaks of shit on the floor. And I kind of like follow the feces. Mm-hmm. And it's this older gentleman who has obviously defecated himself and decided to keep shopping. And it's just coming out of his pant leg as he shops. And I'm like, I don't know what to do here. And it kind of looked like, because I don't want to embarrass the guy, right? Like, I want to be at least a little empathetic here. And it looked like he was heading for the checkout. I'm like, okay. So, employee A, I'm going to make sure that he gets everything he needs and gets taken care of at checkout. And then I'll talk to him after he kind of can get him away and be like, hey, in case you didn't know. But until then, can you just kind of sort of just follow behind him with a mop and a bucket and just kind of mop as you go and make it so it's not like super obvious that our store is just streaked with shit. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. We can do that. And I eventually got to the end, and I'm like, kind of pulling him, like, hey, this is the case. He's like, oh no, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. Like we were taking care of it as it was going. And I'm just like, in case you need to use a restroom or something. And he's like, yeah, okay. Thank you. He comes back in. He comes back out. He thanks me again. And I get another call of the walkie. It's like, hey, somebody threw like their shit-filled drawers in the toilet and tried to flush it. And so now I have a overflowing toilet of shit-filled drawers. And I'm like, there's no rewards in life. You just are always playing from behind. That's what I learned. And that was, retail had a lot of those, to be fair. But that was the grossest one I can think of.
Yeah. My biggest thing is that I like actively try to stay out of grocery stores and things like that. If you're just talking like general retail, I saw some weird stuff when I used to work at Sears. I used to work
at a Sears?
I worked at a Sears. I worked at a Denny's.
I can't see you at either of those.
Oh yeah. I worked as a pet bather for a dog groomer for a bit.
Okay, that one I can see. You are an animal person. That one makes sense. Moving to the next one. This one's from Justin S. Do you think 2025 will be the year for a new class in CC? I'm hoping for Merchant. Yes. I think that they know that they're starting to touch a lot of the same I think that they're starting to touch a lot of the same points when they go back to revisit classes. And we're probably getting to a point where it would be good to bring something brand new in that is just wildly different in every way. Could be the Pirates, could be Merchant, could be the Alchemist, could be the Necromancer. There's a lot of things that are out there that we know at some point in time are coming. I believe that when was the last time we had a new class in 23 with Assassin?
Yeah, with Assassin.
So I think in every other year probably makes sense to me.
I was going to say, I think that we'll get a new class for Classic Constructed in 2025. I don't think we're going to get any new talents, but I do think we're going to get new combinations of talents and classes.
Like a Shadow Ranger type of thing?
Shadow Ranger, Shadow Assassin.
Not an Earth Brute.
But I think that it's probably around time for us to revisit the light and shadow thing, but with new class combos. And so when I think through it, like a shadow assassin makes sense because that's a very thematically like appealing thing.
Yeah.
Similarly, I know we have a light warrior, but I would not be surprised if at some point in the game's life, so why not sooner rather than later, we see like a light guardian, aka a paladin. Because I think because like, yeah, you could say that, you know, maybe Bolton's supposed to be the paladin archetype, but I don't really think so. To me, he's more like just
more
like
of a cleric almost.
Yeah, or just like your standard, like almost like crusader good guy, but like a true protective, like I am the shield, you know, paladin. So like a light guardian with, you know, a little bit of healing, a lot of defense, like that sort of thing makes sense. Could even do something wild where it's like your offhand is a shield that has no defense value, but like you do stuff and it makes spectral shields, or who knows, right? Like there's so many cool things you can touch on there. But yeah, I just think in general there's a lot of class and talent mashups that I think make sense, and I think that next year is when we'll start hitting some of them, right? Also wouldn't be surprised if we revisit Draconic again at some point next year. You know, get either the kind of like Dromai replacement or, you know, something along those lines.
So I think Draconic is interesting though too, like as a talent, because like let's say you do like Draconic Warrior, right? You get to like play attack action warrior with like blaze headlongs and shit like that. I think that that's actually really cool.
Same thing with Draconic Wizard, right? And I know there's somebody at home screaming like, the Emperor already exists, you dorks. He's a Draconic warrior wizard already, and I get it, but like if I'm being honest, that's the reason that I immediately think of those two classes, because it's so fun to do that stuff in Blitz. And even if you just take like a piece of that pie and then make it larger,
to CC and make it bigger.
Yeah. I also, you know, I know I make a lot of jokes about like Earth Brute, but like a Draconic Brute would also be kind of cool. Okay. Because like, I could imagine a big hulking, like almost like a Dragonborn type thing, and give it some fire breathing. I know that's already a card as well if you're listening at home, but you get my point. Or also just giving Brute like a reason to play cards like Thaw, right? I do think, if I'm being honest, I do think that if we ever revisit those, a quote unquote fire and ice set, that's one of the ways that I think ice will be allowed to come back, is if they just print more things that can act as more direct counterplay to it. And I know that like we got Thaw, but I think that if you nest some of that in the Draconic sphere, it could be more palatable to people. Because I don't think that ice should never come back. I think ice has to come back someday. It has to be timed correctly, but I do also, just for public perception, I'm not even saying because I think it's required power level wise, because I was one of those people that, like, I understand other people hated playing against ice. Didn't bother me as much as, say, some of the other classes. But I do think that one way or the other, if you want to make it more palatable, there needs to be at least the illusion of like, here are some more options.
Right. And like, I could see like, and we'll just bleed this into the next question, because Vintox's question was the current meta has decks who run a lot of blues that have high damage output. I believe this would actually be the perfect meta for some form of ice to return without it being oppressive. And asking for our thoughts on that. I think that, I get it. That makes quite a bit of sense. Like, honestly, an ice mechanic that made you pay extra resources makes levels of enlightenment better. If that's actually really frightening. But the other side of that is like an ice ranger or something along those lines. Again, like going back to that wouldn't be so bad if it was more leaned into the ice side of it, or maybe even like an ice rune blade. I know you want Ice Ninja. I know you want Sub-Zero.
I do. I want Sub-Zero.
But like an ice rune blade would be fairly interesting too. But we're kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I could see an Ice Rune Blade where you do something almost kind of like what Florian is doing with the embodiments of Earth and or Rune Chant stuff, and you could kind of do the same thing with and or Frostbites, right? Where it's either like I deal damage to you or I tax you. Like, I could see some interesting stuff there. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of Flesh and Blood, right? There's a ton of design space that is open, and anything 100%. Can be explored. As far as the actual question from Vintox, though, I think this is actually the perfect way to highlight why I think people hated playing against ice so much. Because on the one hand, yeah, you're absolutely right. It'd be a good time for some form of ice to return, because the best decks right now are running a very like thin line of blues to aggression. But also, I think that the second half of your statement is personally incorrect. Saying it would return without being oppressive, I think that's the exact opposite. I think the reason that it felt oppressive before, and the reason why it would still feel oppressive now, and I want to be very clear, I'm saying feel, because whether it is or not doesn't matter. Perception is reality. It will feel oppressive because, yeah, you can say like, okay, well, you have to pay like one more. But when your entire turn is built around like, I have exactly 3 resources and that allows me to put out like 16 damage. But if you tax 1, that drops to 8 because now I can't do my combo line.
Yep.
It doesn't feel fair. It's going to feel oppressive because you're like, yeah, it's 1 more resource. Like, of course that shouldn't be a big deal, but also it cut my entire play line in half. And that's exactly what you would see, right? Like, I'll be honest, Zen, all it would take for Zen to like have a real thing is if we could have Stalagmite back, right? Oh. Not even just like all these other Frostbite makers, just the ability
shut your
to
turn
like,
down.
I'm going to block and then like that throws all of your math off and whatever would be such a big deal. I think right now, this question from Vintox is a bit of a, hey, it's been a while. I kind of forgot how that went. But like in practice, yeah, it does not take much. I haven't
forgot.
Yeah, it does not take much. And so, yeah, I think it would be a great time for it to come back from a balance standpoint, because I think that right now, if anything, having heroes like Enigma and Nu who are running a bit more blues, but also being aggressive with them, I think that would be a really interesting space to explore in terms of like, okay, what happens if we try to tax the blue heavy decks already? But if we're talking about like Zen specifically, Zen does not want ice in any way, shape, or form right now. It would feel oppressive to a Zen player. Whether it is or not, it would feel like it.
Can you imagine if we were in a spot right now where Nu's hero power could get a Channel Lake Frigid? Just for the one turn of go fuck yourself? Like...
Well, and that's the best part, is because your hero power is like... It's as an instant. So if, depending on who you're playing against, right? Like if you're against an Icelander or something and you have a way where you could also then play the Channel Lake Frigid as an instant on top of it. But even without that, like being able to like Winter's Bite people for free, right? Like imagine a turn where, you know, they've got a bunch of Winter's Bites and a channel and whatever, but just like, you're just like, all right, I Winter's Bite you, you know, I Winter's Bite you, I Winter's Bite. Yeah,
and then slam a channel.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the channel's that big of a deal, because you have to find a way to do it as an instant. Otherwise, it's just going to go away at the end of your turn anyway. So, I mean, it really only helps you.
You have to do it at instant speed, but like you can figure it out.
Well, I mean, I guess it would help you. Well, actually, okay, I take it back. So, channel would be good into. Obviously channel's not in that deck, but like if you could have a channel like effect into an Enigma where they're playing all of those defense reactions and trying to play wards at instant speed, suddenly that becomes a lot more difficult for them to shut down your stuff. So
also just a bunch of Winter's Bites is actually really funny too. It's like, yeah, pay for it. You won't.
Yeah, that's what I like. I'm like, give me the Winter's Bites, give me the Frost Fangs with Go Again because of my Slithers, you know? Give me all of those shenanigans.
Icy Grasp or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question is from Blaze Storm, valued member of the Patreon. Do you think they'll ever print a piece of equipment to make non-talented heroes talented? Example, a chess piece that has just Essence of Lightning or Mystic Draconic Essence. Now, they've already done this, because Crown of Dominion makes him royal. Yeah. And royal's a talent.
Kind of. I mean, it is.
It is.
It's an interesting one because, and I think it works with Crown, because specifically it's not something that you are actively deck building around beforehand, though, either.
No, not right now. Well, probably not. I mean,
you are, but you aren't, right? What I'm saying is, though, is that, like, you're not putting like royal attacks in your deck, right?
Sure. Okay.
When I say actively deck building, what I mean is that there are cards in your deck dependent on that equipment.
Like Imperial Warhorn or whatever.
Yeah. And so like I will just jump ahead and say, because of that, I don't think that we will get that. And for that reason, because the royal thing, does, in my opinion, does only work because there are so few deck building options. And again, you're not like, I'm not running the crown so that I can run Imperial Warhorn sort of thing, right? But the entire point of like wanting to run any sort of equipment where suddenly you count as ice, it was really because like you want to use all the ice cards or lightning or earth or whatever. And I think that there's a problem with that on a couple of levels. First, from a design standpoint, I think that it would be kind of a nightmare. And I think it would really hurt your future planning if you had to now assume that every hero you print could potentially be
ice or lightning or earth or whatever,
version,
yeah.
Right? Like we joke about Earth Brute so much here, but like honestly, that's also the cautionary tale, right? Like you don't want to just be like, hey, I have, Bravo as an Earth Guardian now or whatever. Or any other future hero, right? Like you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot from a balance standpoint from that regard. But also, and I know that there were some discussions in the Discord about this already, but there's a lot of like rules considerations that you would have to make as well, because not only does the current wording of the way things work not function the way you want, but, and this is my other problem with it, when you present heroes, part of like the entire sideboarding process and this and that and whatever is that like you're supposed to see a hero and have a general idea of what their identity is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could make it part of the ruling that when you present your hero, you also present the equipment or whatever. But my problem is that it's almost like you're presenting a whole new hero at that point, because there is a big difference between an Azalea and a Lightning Azalea, for example.
Yes.
Like just a huge difference. And so at that point, like just print the Lightning Ranger, right? Make it Lexi 2.0, whatever the case may be. But I would rather see them in all the instances where they're like, hey, we want to make this equipment because we like the idea of like this class combination. Like you just make that class combination on a hero. Doing it on the equipment is, in my opinion, for no reason, limiting your ability to create more interesting heroes down the line. And it is also ruining your marketability, because let's be honest, heroes are the most marketable part of Flesh and Blood. And if you're going to print an equipment that just lets people build a hero at home, then what's the point of coming up with these cool, well thought out heroes in the first place? So that's why I don't think that it will happen or that it should happen, because while I like the idea of it, right? I think we all like that thought experiment, and maybe that's a fun, that's the beauty of physical card games, right? A lot of the best multiplayer and casual formats of Magic started because people sat around a table and said, let's just do something because we can make up whatever rules we want at our kitchen table, right?
That's how EDH exists.
Right? Like, you could do something where you're like, hey, let's do a thing where like we play Ultimate Pit Fighter, but also everyone gets to pick a talent with their hero or whatever, right? Like, that's just a thing. Like, you can just do that. But for them to print it, I think hurts their business and hurts their game more than it helps it. That's where I'm at.
I think the rules consideration is the part that I stick the most on, just because, like, okay, you have a deck, you have this piece of equipment that gives you Essence of Ice. You have all these ice cards in your deck, but you have the ability to present the deck without the equipment. Okay, now you have an illegal deck? Like, what? Like, that doesn't compute, right? Like, that just doesn't, like, with the royal cards, they just have a diminished effect if you're not royal. So you can still just use them. Right. But here, like, there's a deck building consideration too, where this is now just illegal. And that's another knock against it, right? Like, if you fuck up in like this would be so bad. But if you, like, let's say that you had this Essence of Ice chest and or boots, because we'll go Guardian, because Guardian don't have footwear anyway. It doesn't matter. And you have these boots that make your Bravo be an Earth Brute, right? Or Earth Guardian, right? and you get done, you shuffle up, you sideboard and whatever, you present everything, you flip your equipment, and you forgot to put boots down. Do you just lose the game? Because you've now presented an illegal deck?
Or
like, how dumb is that?
Or do you change the rules where like they can be in your deck, but then you just can't play them? So like they are
blanks?
They are so they become like cracked baubles basically, right? So like you can pitch them, but you can't. That would be my ruling, right? Like you can't block.
You can only pitch them. The only thing you can do is pitch. They become baubles of their color.
Yeah, maybe. But even still, like the other
dumb.
problem that I have,
sucks.
It's dumb and it's convoluted and it's not like new player intuitive. But also, if I'm being honest, like part of the whole thing with the talents as well is that they're supposed to be like a selling point of those heroes in a storytelling way too, and in a lore way, right? And so you're also, in my opinion, kind of diminishing all of that. You know, if you say like, hey, these heroes are special because they're from, you know, the Aria region, or, you know, they're from Volcor, right? Like it makes all the Volcor heroes far less cool if anybody can be a dragon. You know what I mean? So,
right. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. It just doesn't.
I will say now I'm open to them doing more talents like a royal, where it's not really a true talent. I almost like that royal is more like a title, right? Mm-hmm. So like I could see them have things where, you know, they might do one like officer. Like I was going to say general, but obviously we're using like general action, general whatever. So you can't be like a general of an army on your thing, because that would be too confusing. Right. But like admiral for the pirate set, or officer or whatever, or, you know, you could have anything that like has a status like knight, right? Like you could be a knight warrior, and knight is something that you do. And then like you could have, you know, things where you become knighted, right? As part of the either the game or equipment or whatever. So I would like them to consider exploring more things like that. But I think the key is you have to go into it knowing this is something that anybody can get versus this is something core to a hero's identity. And I think the existing, you know, ice, earth, draconic, mystic stuff is more about their core identity.
Yeah. Moving on. Next one's from Poxanus. Thoughts on the First Strike product and how it's positioned against other Blitz decks given the similarities. I'm going to let you take this one because you've been playing a lot of Blitz with a new player, the new player being your son Stark. How do you feel about this?
I really like them right now. And I will say it's entirely based on some preconceived notions that I am putting like forward in my head. Because I do think that when we get Rosetta, we'll probably also get Blitz decks for that as well. I mean, maybe not. Maybe First Strike is going to replace those.
No, we already know we do.
Right.
Because they gave the product.
Right. But I also, to me, that says that the Aurora deck will likely be different between the two. And what I like about that, and because they said so in their marketing materials, is these are meant to be like more simplified for teaching. As somebody who has been playing a lot of just Blitz decks from different sets at home against each other, a lot of these decks are pretty good when they're into decks of the same set, and then struggle the minute you do any sort of cross stuff, right? So like playing the Prism starter into the Zen starter, for example, feels really bad for the Zen because they have no way to pop your stuff, right?
They're getting smashed by seven power heralds.
But also, like, even for the Prism player, where like you're just dropping bombs on them, you're looking at your equipment and you're like, well, I have Spell Void, right? So like if I'm not playing against anybody who has Arcane, like why do I care? But again, this was designed with Chain.
Yeah.
So it makes sense in that regard. But we've been just throwing everything. We've played Aria decks against, Mistveil decks against Monarch decks, right? Like anything that I had lying around, and I've bought a lot of stuff for teaching people the game. We've been throwing at each other. And so with that in mind, and with that kind of like cross-pollination showcasing the problems, and I'll be honest, like even some decks within the set. So like I think I mentioned it on this podcast on a previous episode, but I know I've said it to other people. Playing new against Zen from the Mistveil decks also feels bad for the Zen player because there are no defense reactions there. The Enigma deck has them and has ways to make ward as an instant, but Zen just has to like pre-block with a bunch of his 2 blocks or just take whatever that new blitz deck is throwing at him, right? So even in those regards, it's not like necessarily a great one-to-one pairing. So what I'm hoping for is that these first strike decks are designed with always being paired against hopefully other first strike decks for the long foreseeable future. So yeah, you'll have your like in-set experience if you want to throw those against each other, but like long-term for true new player experience, if you're just like, hey, you know, I might not want to always play against stuff from the same set because like maybe, you know, imagine 2 people, they walk into a store, they're like, hey, we want to learn Flesh and Blood. And one of us just like really likes the aesthetic of illusionists, right? And then the other one just really loves the aesthetic of like Bolton, because again, he's the closest thing to a paladin, let's say, right? But they're out of Prism decks, so somebody buys the, you know, the Enigma deck or whatever, and that, or the, you know, Dromai deck, and then I buy the Bolton deck, and now they're like, they just don't match up well. It would be nice long term if all of these first strike decks cover a bunch of different archetypes that might appeal to new players, but they're also designed with the same power level across first strike decks, as opposed to just decks from the set. That's what I'm hoping for from this. And like I said, it's a preconceived notion, but just based on my experience playing a bunch of these different ones against Stark, that is a need in my opinion. I think the Armory decks are also helping in that regard from the classic constructed side. But for a true starter experience where you want to offer like a broad level of products to entice players, but you still want them to always be on a similar power level and not care about, you know, set or block or whatever, I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, well said. No notes. Moving to the next one from Sergeant Snipes. Hello, Matt. So a serious question for once. What 3 heroes would you consider top of the meta in Blitz for the upcoming skirmish, excluding Blaze? So I do play an okay amount of Blitz. So my top 3 would be Emperor. Emperor, again, anything that deals arcane in Blitz is already automatically going to be very good, which is why Briar is also in that same tier. It's very aggressive, can just end the game in one spell, just one turn and be done, with a lot of different angles of attack, and just slamming a channel usually just is good enough, and is not gone yet. Will be after skirmish season, probably after week 1 of skirmish season, to be honest. And then honestly, Enigma New Moon, that I've seen that deck play, and it is degenerate as all fuck, because you can, once you make chi, everything is, you basically go up to have being essentially a 40 health hero. And that's a lot to whittle through while you're still being attacked by, 4 damage, with Iris Reality, just like every fucking aura is just an attack for 4. So it's like, it's Decimator Dory with Ward. And that's terrifying, especially in Blitz. And especially when with the flips to make Spectral Shields off of your equipment, with G, it just turns into a goddamn nightmare. So I think those would be the top 3 that I would have my eye on for this Blitz season. I'll just be playing Briar for skirmish if I play in any.
Yeah, so my biased answer is Arachne Solitary Confinement, because he got a lot of new tools. He's already a ton of fun to play, and I think he's going to sneak up on people. But
is an assassin.
My real answer, the deck that I think is maybe kind of being slept on because, and I never thought I'd say this deck would be slept on, but because Enigma New Moon is kind of taking some of the market share of its players away, and because it's kind of the shiny new thing, I think Prism is still really good in Blitz.
Prism is really good in Blitz.
And I think that given that people might play New Moon, like I'm not convinced that Prism is bad in a New Moon. I actually think Prism might be okay into it, and is still pretty okay into some of the other decks. So I agree with you. I think Emperor is always going to be part of the discussion right now because it's the best, like, primarily arcane hero, and it can it can surprise you with how resilient it is because, yeah, you start with less health, but then you get all of the like meaty warrior equipment if you really need it.
Or flame scale furnace to just make sure that your reds are not reds.
Right. All that stuff. So like Emperor is very efficient. So yeah, that one should be part of the equation. I think New Moon is actually a really solid blitz deck. But I really do think that Prism still has a lot of play right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like just throwing that out there, of the decks that you were talking about, how many of them are running a ton of like natural poppers? Like
natural poppers?
Yeah.
Like the top really don't.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying, like, I think that it could be, it's always one of those things as well where I think your local meta matters a lot. Mm-hmm. But I do think where, like, if you want to play Herald Prism and just dodge Rhinar, you could do very well.
Yeah, you do. Like, Briar has a good out to you, and that's just by slamming a channel. And okay, now every fucking attack in my deck is a popper. I don't give a shit. That's something, but otherwise, yeah, the other decks really don't. Like, most Emperor builds don't even run CNC.
No,
like they've just like ignore.
They're like you just have power. The text on the bottom. You don't have a hero power.
Right. They just ignore it.
And the few that I have seen that run it as a one-off.
Right.
It's just as like emergency, go fetch it. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, like the popper counts are very low in the top tier decks because they're just all trying to go fast. And you do have the ability to just play Luminaris Angel's Glow and just be like, okay, 1 for 7, 1 for 7.
Seems pretty, and with on hits too, right? Like seems pretty good.
Into Soul, yeah. They can go get
into Soul, but like even if it's just make a Spectral Shield or deal an Arcane or
but into Soul, go get an Angel. Like you could easily be staring down the barrel of 18 damage turns that you can't do anything about, and you have 20 health. Like that's very scary.
Yeah,
and yeah, you could Prism could theoretically one shot you, so that's definitely something to consider. Last question is from Geeks First Jacob. I actually got to meet Jacob in person for the first time ever at Origins. Super pleasant interaction. He took a picture of Ethan and myself and posted it on Twitter. Even better is he posted and tagged Flesh and Pod's Twitter account, and in the background of the picture was Jordan. So had extra Flesh and Pod value. So I thought that was nice. He asks, what will convince vendors at conventions to buy Fab singles? Outside the known normal preferred vendors that go to Fab related events, it seems like most don't bring singles or buy at conventions, i.e. Origins. Is that bad for Fab long term? What are the odds that continues at Gen Con? How would you convince new vendors to sell and buy singles? Thoughts? I can go long form on this. I can give you the short form. Okay. So as much as Flesh and Blood has created a global foothold, and it is still a very pocketed game. There are still effectively large cells of Flesh and Blood that exist as player bases. They're not really like, you talk about your Greg Grinders of the world. Shout out to Greg, who lives in a town in the middle of Kansas that doesn't have a store that supports Flesh and Blood. He doesn't live in one of the bubbles of Flesh and Blood because it's not a truly ubiquitous game that carries everywhere yet. Because of that, a lot of times these types of vendors don't have a local scene to acquire from or sell to, and they don't have online store presences that people would search up for to buy these things. So they just end up being a depreciated asset on the balance sheet. They don't do it. They don't move. And it's not because of Flesh and Blood necessarily. It's because of their player base and their consumer base. As an example, there was one shop or one store, because there's like at Origins is a board game convention. The TCG representation at Origins is very small. So your also normally your TCG presence at Origins is going to be newer games trying to get more of a foothold in general anyway. But there was one booth I saw outside of the Realm. The Realm might have brought some of their Flesh and Blood stuff with you. That's a long story about where the Realm was tucked away at. But there was one other vendor I saw in the hall that even had anything Flesh and Blood, and that's because they were fire selling their entire product because they didn't have a player base. So they're selling like boxes of history pack for $50. So you could have just gone in and swooped in and bought things for under distribution or under wholesale. I think that doesn't say anything about Flesh and Blood long term, personally. Mainly because the reason that you see Magic is because Magic has been around for 30 years. Magic debuted at Origins. Like, that game first got played at Origins in 1992 or 93, whatever it was. Like, in a public setting. That game has been around and has been a staple at Origins forever. Vendors know, no matter what, that there's a market out there for the Magic cards that they're going to acquire. And so that's what they do. It doesn't behoove a vendor, and this is the other part of the story. Most people don't show up at an Origins or a Gen Con to go and offload their cards. They're not there for that. They're there to acquire things. They're there to try out new things. They're there to and to do things they wouldn't necessarily normally do. As an example, the last thing that I want to do at Gen Con is play card games. I play card games. I'm going to go and play. I'm going to register for one Flesh and Blood event. I am probably just going to go sit down at round one, long enough to get a Blaze promo, and then be done. Because I'm not interested in playing Flesh and Blood at Gen Con. I'm interested in talking to them. I'm not interested in any other part of it at Gen Con. I'm not interested in Alpha Clash at Gen Con. I'm interested in the Alpha Clash board game at Gen Con because I haven't got a chance to put. I've held the box for it in my hands, and I've held the minis in my hands, but I haven't held the rest of the assets, and I haven't played a physical game of it. So I'm looking forward to that at Gen Con. I'm looking forward to see what kind of crazy fucked up shit Kingdom Death Monster is doing at Gen Con. I'm looking forward to grinding True Dungeons at Gen Con because it's fun as hell. But the last thing I want to do in a space like that is even think about card gaming because it's what I normally do. So that's probably more why vendors don't buy and sell singles is because there's nothing to support buying and selling singles at these conventions.
Yeah, I was going to take it a step further as well and say that part of the reason the known Flesh and Blood vendors can do it is because they're doing these setups at Flesh and Blood events. So when people do come and they dump their collection, the vendor knows that there's a good chance that somebody else at that same event might be trying to finish their deck for the event. Or maybe, they play day one and they scrub out of the big event and they want to play inside a fence, but they want to make some changes. So they're looking for some cards or whatever. But when it's more like the introductory stuff, there's less people looking for singles and more people just looking for introductory products and learn to plays and whatever. And so that can be a struggle. There's a large number of stores. I know this is going to sound kind of shocking because we're in 2024, but there's a large number of stores that do the bare minimum when it comes to like online inventory and ordering. Yep. And so, as Logan's talking about this being a very pocketed game, if you don't have a loyal player base at home, you could still move singles online. There's a ton of stores that do it and they do it very well. But if you're not into that, then why go through all of the hassle and the hustle to
and
pick
the logistics of hauling it?
Right. Because, you're going to have to bring stuff and haul it, but then not have shelf space, quote unquote, for it. You'll have shelf space, but it's not what you're really looking for that enhances your home base. So that's part of it too. The answer is obviously game just needs to grow. There's also, if I'm being honest, there's also a number of stores that Maybe they tried it and it didn't take off for them, or there's still, believe it or not, stores that are like, it's not going to survive long term, or it's a scam, or this or that. Like, you still hear it. I know it sounds dumb, but you do still hear it. So there are some people who just don't pick it up on principle, and that's fine. That's their choice. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is there's just a lot of moving parts, and as weird as it sounds, there's a lot of stuff that has to go well and together for stores to make the jump to doing the convention thing. They usually have to have some sort of player base at home, and they likely want to do buying and selling at a place where they at least know there's going to be events. So like, I wouldn't expect it at like an Origins. The places where I would expect more vendors to maybe start popping up, if possible, would be at like a DreamHack or something.
Yeah, that makes way more sense, because there are events there to support needing singles and stuff like that. That makes way more sense. Hopefully that gave a little bit of perspective. Like, you just walking around Origins this past weekend, right? Like, just doing a lap. I was so busy during most of the convention that I made like 2 cursory laps around the place. Didn't get much of a chance to look at anything. One of the laps was Dagan was like, "Hey," he's like, "I'm gonna go take a walk." And I'm like, "You know what? I'll go with." And he's like, we walk away. He's like, "Yeah, I need to go find this cosplayer because my sisters want something from him." I'm like, "Oh, Night Mage, sure." And he's just like, "How did you know that?" I'm like, my wife loves Night Mage. So that's why I figured, that's the only like person I could think of here that would fit the mold. And I'd seen him walking the day before in like a giant fucking mech suit with wings. And I was like, okay. So we walked over to his booth, and he was in Beetlejuice cosplay, looked great. Talked to him for a little bit. He recorded a video for my wife, which was fun, and stuff like that. And that's like the most interaction I did with anything outside of the Alpha Clash booth the entire weekend, and casting. So I did not see much of that convention. What I did see was like there were Miniature Market and a couple of like other smaller vendors were the only card vendors in there. I didn't even see Troll and Toad, I think, was probably there, but I didn't see the TNT booth at all. But it was probably there. I have a blank spot in my field of vision for Troll and Toad because I don't want to go there anyway. So there's that. But I wouldn't even have thought that, you know what, I'm going to be on the lookout for Flesh and Blood singles. And the only reason I knew about the place selling Flesh and Blood boxes for cheap is because one of my locals was there, and he's like, "Hey, I went and picked this up for $50 because there's a place fire selling their Flesh and Blood." And I didn't even make it back to that booth at all during the weekend. I didn't buy anything. So, sure. Yeah, that's all I got. What about you?
That tracks, but that's all I got. I don't have anything to add because I didn't go.
Oh, what a tragedy.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest,
honestly, it's just the next evolution, because I went from like, I went to LA, but I never made it to the event, to now I'm just not making it to events.
You're just not making it to events. I mean, you made it to Minneapolis fine.
Yeah, it's so weird. My year for travel this year has been kind of awful for getting to events, and
you're doing pretty shitty. Like, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Well, let's thank some patrons, shall we? Seems like a good time for that. Our associate producers are Andy, Sindra, Jacoben, Kenny, Larry, and the Salty Sea Cat. Our executive producers on up are Alex, Blaystorm, value member of the Patreon, Dom, Lance Goodthrust, Matt Two Tokes, Poxonus, Trevor, Papa Mike, Philip, Rich, and Sunny. If you are interested in becoming a patron of Flesh and Pod, you can go to patreon.com/fleshandpod. The link is in the show notes. There are 6 tiers to choose from. Any paid tier gets you into Fap After Dark. I think we're going to gun for next week. We'll see how that works out. If not this week, if we can make it work. That's going to just be our fuck around, don't record it show. Kind of speak our minds a little bit more, a little freer, but mostly it's a good way for the listeners to come in with their thoughts in a nice short form. Not even short form. It's pretty fucking long form, honestly. I think we've had to go 3 hours before, but with, being able to just interact directly type of thing, they tend to really, honestly, we get good attendance and people like it. That's all I can say. If you need to contact the show, you can send us an email at fleshandpod@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at fleshpod. The best thing you can do, you can go onto YouTube and like and subscribe and comment. We do respond to all the comments. The other thing you can do, best thing you can do, is join our Discord. Link is in the show notes. It's free to join. You don't need to be a member of the Patreon or anything else. You can just kind of come hang out. There's a fuckload of channels in there for everything from pickles to brews to deck brews to movies to general shit talking, just whatever. So come in, enjoy it, have a laugh. And then that way, if you're in our Discord, I do have DMs open to anybody I share a server with, so you can just reach out and talk to us. Darick, where can they find you?
The Discord is the best place. So you just show up and ping me, or you say something in the Pickle Posse.
The Pickle Posse is an active channel. That's for sure. What's the latest thing in the Pickle Posse? It's been kind of.
It's just me saying I'll get those things for
so spicy dill pickle shit.
Yep.
Yep. She's like, I will be hunting these down, and then Charmer's like, here is a picture of them, and Elaine, where? Basically, right. Where Gib now? Pretty
much. So yeah, the Discord. You can find me on Twitter and Twitch and YouTube. Now that things are settling for a little bit, I'm hoping to get a couple more Twitch streams in with the more new testing, because like I said, I've made some changes to the deck since the calling. I also probably want to do some Talishar testing live on stream for Arachne Solitary Confinement, just because that's going to be upcoming for skirmish
I can
season.
join with that and just bash you to death with Briar a few times.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a great time.
Yeah, be fun. That sounds like a good time.
Those are the places to find me.
Yeah, if you need me, you can always just find me either in the Discord, like I said before, or my personal Twitter's is at Logan Peterson. But honestly, I'm the person that handles all the socials for Flesh and Pod, so contacting Flesh and Pod is the same thing as contacting me, it turns out. It's just Darick can see it too. I don't have anything else. That's kind of been my week. Kind of been my everything this week. That's all I got. You got anything else?
No, that's it.
Good enough. All right, well, I guess we'll talk to you next week for number 135. Again, never do this. Just don't.
Just don't do the thing.
Unless you're us. Because apparently we can't stop. Or won't stop. One of the two. Or both. I can't make any decisions. All right. Good enough. We'll talk to y'all next week. Bye.